Hi, it's Greg Chambers coming at you. 2022 is what this is. It's been a while since I've done one of these where for a while, every time I did a presentation for a group, I would record its own version I'd either put it as a teleseminar or a webinar. This one's going to be a webinar. And this was for a group that I was working with at the end of last year. Let me move backwards here. This is about building the never-ending pipeline. So January, as I record this, this presentation was for an accounting firm. And so late last year, the idea behind it was we're all coming out of COVID. And with the tax season that was going to be coming up, ramping up and coming back into the office, the general question was rebuilding the pipeline. Like what are some of the best ways to rebuild the pipeline? Managers had questions. Individual partners and associates who are trying to work their way into partner. Everybody's got questions as to how do we do this, and with that in mind, that's how we did this. So different circumstances, right? So what has changed out there, and then what is changing about how it is that we go about business. So that's where the never-ending pipeline is kind of the concept that we came up with, because it is the kind of that elusive thing that we're after. It's the thing that gives our business an advantage. And when thinking of business and advantage and COVID, and this article from the Wall Street Journal jumped out at me. Inside of this, it was the part that jumped out was just the title. I know I was trying to get you to click on it, and it worked. But predatory and opportunistic. And it's kind of as it's like, as other people are struggling, Southwest is trying to play their advantage. I think that's what we're all trying to do, right? So is it predatory? Maybe so. Maybe we are all just trying to be a little bit predatory. The never-ending pipeline is a process that I'm going to be talking to you about. It's not an event. It's not a single thing that we can do. But in there, I'll give you some tactics as to how to do it. But let's start with the basics first. Why would you want to build a whatever it's called, the never-ending pipeline? What advantages does it give? These are the simple reasons why that I came up with. One is forecasting, being able to see the future. The better your pipeline and the more consistent you are at building your pipeline, the easier it is to learn. The other thing that comes out is being more selective with opportunities. The more opportunities you have, obviously, things you can say, there are things you can say no to. The third one is that it attracts the better your firm is at bringing in more and more opportunities, especially if they're saying no to opportunities. That attracts talent over time, because people want to be part of that, where maybe they don't have to work as hard to find new opportunities. And the last thing, of course, is cash flow. It just helps when you have more opportunities and you can select better opportunities, when you have better talent working on those opportunities and you're able to predict it going forward. That all helps with cash flow too. So if those are the reasons why you'd want to build it, then where does it come from? Well, for most of us, especially in professional services business, which I consider myself part of as in consulting, is peer-to-peer referrals, right? So anytime that I get a CEO telling another CEO, you should call Greg, those are the best referrals, right? It's a lot better than me calling the CEO. It's a lot better than an employee of the CEO saying, you should talk to Greg. Or, somebody's big brother who I happen to meet at a bar somewhere or something, saying, hey, you should call Greg. Anytime that it's like a business meeting, I don't know exactly how this happens anymore, but if they're meeting and then somebody's like, I'm working on this problem, and they say, you need to talk to Greg, those are the best. So those are probably your best too. There was an SBA survey that came out, and that survey said that same thing, or what it said that jumped out at me is it said that the average business gets like a referral. Every customer gives an average of one referral according to these businesses. And I thought, that's interesting. I don't know that that's my firm. And most firms I work with don't actually see that. They're lucky to get unsolicited referrals from half a dozen people. And that most of the time, if a firm gets a lot of referrals, it comes from a person or a firm. It can all be retracted back to one single relationship. So we would love to find that relationship, right? If you don't have that already, where you're getting a bulk of referrals from one person, that averages out to the one per client that you get that the SBA says you should have. Or if you have one already, could we find a second one, right? Those are the things to think about. So when I look at these, the challenge is not only do we not necessarily get this, one referral per customer, or the bulk of our referrals come from one place. The big challenge with them is that we have no idea when those referrals are coming in. So the result is business goes up and down, right? So when business goes up and down, your investment in that business goes up and down. You can't say no to referrals, and any referral that comes in, even if it's not a fit, you tend to have to feel like you have to take it. And if you're a good recruiting firm, that'll be based on, when the good recruit comes across your desk. If they catch you at a lull in business and you're not sure what's coming in next, you may have to pass on them. But if you have a strong pipeline where you can, your results are a little bit more even, when those people come across your way, come across your desk, you can take advantage of their talents right away. But probably the most important one, again, going back to that little drawing I did at the beginning, makes cash flow predictable. So, I guess these are the things that we just kind of talked about. Today, we're going to dig into the referrals and the other sorts of business, but more important, we're going to get closer to answering the question about building the never-ending pipeline. There's a good chance everything I'm going to talk about you already know, and you have done it or you thought about doing it in the past. And so the big question is, well, then why don't we do it, right? If we know that we need to attract people to our firm, right? Because of the work we do, if we know that the best way is to tell people, everybody's got to know what we're doing, and then we got to get improve that conversation that we have in between people. If that's going to, if this is all going to happen, how is it that we make it happen? It's probably an easy way. So that's what we're going to talk about. We have this originally was, if you can believe this, this was 2 hours. There's zero chance that we go through the 2 hours because that did rely on a lot of questions coming from the crowd in specific instances that were very firm specific that we could talk about. This will go much faster than that. They generally tend to be 30 to 45 minutes. So what you'll walk out with is you'll walk out with some tools to get this stuff done. If you're in any of these roles, this is kind of what I would expect that you could walk away with. If you're in management currently, I would say that this is good. You'll walk away with a couple tools for framing discussions, right? So if your job is to manage business development people and help them along the way, you know who I'm thinking of because hopefully you're watching it. When you are, you have limited time, and when you're talking to people, these are good tools for framing discussions on that. If you are actually in business development, this is really these tools will be helpful for prioritizing. If you're new to business development, take it all in and just kind of absorb it. But the biggest thing I would say is you need to get busy. You need to start getting to work. So, questions and clarifications. As I said, this is a recording, so I'll try to remember what they were. But at the end, I'll give each of you some next steps. So before we get started, let's talk about what it is that you're going to get from me, what it is in my background that kind of dictates most of what it is that I say. So years ago, I tried to check it all, right? I went away from my business, which was sales and business-to-business sales. And I was working inside of a big bank, and I decided to check it all and start a little tropical shirt company. And so I did. I wanted to become the mad gringo and work from the middle of the Big Island, which is our big joke. Omaha is what we called it. Omaha, Nebraska, the middle of the Big Island. And but it's also your tropical shirt source. Funny again, because who expects tropical shirts to come from Omaha? Long story short, it didn't really work. But in the course of doing that work for those years, I bumped into another apparel company, and they were doing much better than I was doing. They actually kind of built the company that I wish I could have built. And even though I had probably a big head start on financial know-how, definitely on the technological side, I knew a lot more. I had a pretty strong vision of where I wanted to be, and they kind of have stumbled into theirs. They did better. And the reason I bring this all up is because I went to go consult. They were my first consulting job when I hung up my shingle. They're like, "Oh, help us with some of the technology, some of the other things that you were doing. We'd like to know how to do that." And when I got there, I was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are doing very little different than I was doing, but your results are so much better. What is it that is going on?" And what I came up with was that I called it fits. It was the easiest way to describe it because I had focus. My strategic vision was strong. I had a technological advantage, and then I knew how to, how to build some of this apparel. I knew how to sell some of this apparel online. I knew how to help retailers with some technology. But what I never tapped into was all my people's individual self-interest, and that's the I. And the reason that is important is because what I found is it's colored my work since, right? So if I walk you through this, it's going to make sense, right? If there's no effort, you don't get results, right? But on the far end, if there's like heavy duty effort, you also get kind of penalized. Your results can suffer. They're not going to be great. And so the sweet spot is in that middle part, right? So if everything else follows a bell curve, what I'm interested in is I'm not interested in people who aren't going to do the work. I'm not interested in people who are going to do too much work, but I am interested in those people that are somewhere in the middle, which is what I found that these guys had. These guys had a bunch of people who were energized and they were optimized in how they did their work. And they tended to do things that benefited the business, but also in their self-interest a lot more effectively than my people did. And because there were things I was doing that was actually killing that inside of my people. And this became the sweet spot that I was aiming for. And it's the sweet spot that I'm aiming for as we go through the rest of our discussion. So as I tell you these things, keep this in mind. What I'm after is for you, everybody's little bell curve, it changes a little bit differently. If you're in business development and you're doing nothing, there's very little I can do to help you. And if you're doing way too much, but your results are suffering, what I can have you do is back off and just focus on the things that are most important. That's what we'll talk about going forward. So let's jump in. Let's talk about the things we already know when it comes to building a pipeline. So those three bits, those three little pieces, little drawings I showed you before, let's get into those a little bit more. I am going to, well, you know what? Before I get too far into these slides, one of the questions that came up early was, Greg, like, what is it that what are you doing right now? And so this is a good point to tell you where it is that if your pipeline has been neglected, and to a degree mine has, right? For the last couple of years, I have not been the most aggressive prospector for a variety of reasons, but the number one thing being it just didn't feel like it. So it takes a while to get back into the flow of the business. And so when we are trying to build this, right, before I get into my diagnostic tools, the first thing I gotta do is I just gotta get in touch with all the people that I already know. So you have a list, I have a list, and inside that list, the question is we want to get in touch with people, but what's the best way to do it? And so what I do is I divide my list into three parts, right? Because my list includes everybody. The joke is even including my mom, but it is kind of like that, right? It's an extensive list that includes people who are in my target market and people who are out. So I'm interested in identifying primarily the first pass through, which ones would I pull out and say, you know what, these guys are in my exact target market, not the easiest ones to talk to, not the ones I've done business with in the past, but the ones I'd like to do business with in the future. Which are the ones that know my work, right? So that would be list two. So if I have list one as my target market, these are everybody who's in it, including ones who know the work. But then the second list is just who are the people that actually I've done work with. And if I sequester those out, then I've got everyone else, right? So you kind of triage the list into the third part. And then what I'll do at this point, if we're going to prime the pump just to get going with everything, the easiest thing to do is reach out. So the people that I'm going to reach out to are specifically the target market, right? So if I look at those three lists, I'm going to call on group one. So in group one, the conversation is pretty simple. So I'm giving this to you because somebody had asked me for an example, and my language is pretty much, it follows this framework. I'm going to catch up with you and me. And so if you're watching this and then you get a call from me, this is generally how the conversation goes. I'm going to ask you about something that's happening in the future, right? And maybe even something that goes post COVID-19, like when we get to the end of this, what is it you see happening? Because I'm trying to get you to put yourself in a place that's not today, but a place that's in tomorrow. And then I want to offer a little bit of work that I've been doing, or a case study, or some sort of insight to where we can continue the conversation. So my example is, this is Greg. It's a quick call to catch up and to hear about what's going on with your firm. I want to tell you about what I'm working on too. So tell me a story, right? What's going on? What are your short-term objectives for 2022? Would be a question. What are some long-term objectives that you guys are working on? What are are there any opportunities coming out of COVID that you see? Then that would lead into my projects. Like, so one of the projects I've been working on is ramping up new associates with business development skills. So we did a couple of hiring projects. The client is concerned the new guard isn't aggressive enough. And so before replacing the people that we're going to replace eventually, we want to just figure out if they have the ability, and then maybe if we should coach them up first. So we did some assessments, we tweaked the training, and then something interesting popped out. That the firm was suffering from a future vision, and that people couldn't explain it. So they had a foggy idea, so we made it more concrete. And what we found is that a couple of them, things clicked with them because they were able to see where it is that they fit into the future with the firm. Senior management gets more hopeful, and new associates are finding more opportunities, and that's good stuff. So my question, do you know anybody who would benefit from work like this? So that's a really rough example, and obviously, if we were on the phone and role playing, or doing this in real life, it would flow much smoother. But it generally follows that format, right? Let's do a quick catch up, if that's okay. Do you have time for this, or do you want to reschedule it? Then let's talk about your future, and then let me tell you about something I've been doing, and do you know anybody that I should be talking to? So again, why would we do this? We're after those peer-to-peer referrals, right? So we're after somebody who's on our list in our target market, and somebody else who they might know. Do I ask them for work? Was a question that came out. Generally, I don't. If you having enough of these conversations with your target market tends to lead to, actually, I rarely get through the entire list of my target market onto everyone else. And the reason is because you just find people to talk to, and then you chase after those opportunities. I'm a one-man band, so there's only so much work I can handle anyways, and generally new projects will come from that. Group two, I'm a little bit more into just mass email. So actually, I take that back. Let's do group two is more of a personalized email. So I'll send out something individual to them, something I can do while I'm watching TV, for instance. Watching a basketball game, I can kind of make a format and then pop out some emails there. So I'm trying to add some value to them, maybe suggest some things, and then give them a specific company that I'm hoping to talk to, and ask for an introduction. And then the last group, everyone else, I am going to do more of a broadcast. So some sort of generic value that can be applied to anybody, as opposed to the specific value on the personalized email, or the being able to ask about what it is that they're working on, and then responding to that in the target market calls. Those are the ways. What I'm trying to do here is, if we haven't been doing a great job of initial prospecting, following this process is going to prime the pump for everything else that I'm about to give you. So if you're asking Greg, what is it that you're doing? This is the kind of thing. Why do I say this out loud? I say it out loud because I got to do it myself. I need to do a better job of working through the rest of my list. The email thing tends to be the easiest to do. And so what I'd love to do is I need to get better at making the phone calls. And so I'll do, right, I'm doing those, I'm setting up those triggers so that I can do the phone calls. So that's pre-work that if we were just, in 2018, I might have said, I might have just assumed that you've been doing a lot of this stuff and then we build on that. For 2022, going forward, coming out of COVID, enough people have been kind of working from home and doing different things that this type of activity, picking up the phone with your target market, sending out personalized emails to the people who know your work, and then doing a broadcast email to everyone else, that's going to probably kick a few things up to get you kicked off for post-tax time, right? And building up towards 2023 on there. So let's do that. Oh, and then I put this little picture in there because I did come up with a report that I did with another consultant. And that was just that's like a quick little value add. That would be the thing that I would broadcast email to people. Or if the conversation with the target market isn't going that well, I might send that along too. So again, I'm putting this in because this is something that I found before I get into any of the advanced tactics that I'm about to give you. This basic stuff needs to be taken care of. And if you can just take care of the basic stuff, check that your people are taking care of the basic stuff and monitor their activity there, enough new opportunities will come along that you can take advantage of some of the other things. So with that in mind, let's get around to that. And there's the, who would you recommend for that business? So let's get into it. These are the key components for building peer-to-peer referrals. Never-ending pipeline. We'd like a never-ending pipeline that consists solely of people who are peer-to-peer referrals. Let's jump into it. So first of all, what I'm about to describe, these are simple things, but they're not necessarily that easy, right? So your target market needs to know about you. Pretty simple. That's what the prime the pump that I just talked about really helps with that. All the people influencing a decision need to help you. So that guy in the middle who's kind of talking to the arrows, pointing down. There are multiple people involved in our decisions. I was just reading a technology paper. This technology paper said that firms of over 250 employees, some of the technology purchases were touching at least 7 people to get made. The decision to get made, and for larger organizations like enterprise sales, we're touching as many as 23 people. No wonder the sales cycles are so long. What a nightmare. That being said, my advice to that group would be you got to make sure inside of all of your target markets that you've identified at least 23 people to know about the value that you bring. So the people that know your work, but then everybody who's involved in that decision is separate. And then the last one is improving the nature of those conversations. So when you are sitting in front of somebody, I'm just double checking my notes, the being able to generate referrals from conversations is are the activities that we're going to talk about. So this in general, right, when you're in front of the right people, you have great conversations. This process of focusing on these 3 elements leads to other people saying things like, hey, talk to Greg. Hey, talk to this firm. Because they've been bumping into your work, or they're going to be reaching out to you directly, or when you get in front of them, you have something to fall back on because they're at least familiar with your reputation or the work that you've been doing. So at a high level, it's really that simple. Get in front of more people. More people need inside those companies need to know who you are, and when you're in front of them, have really good conversations. Sounds great, right? And this is what we'll talk about. So let's talk about how these are going to interact with each other. What happens if you're out of balance in any one of these things, right? Like, so for the one that I find pretty common is we have great market awareness, but we don't have great conversation, and we have great conversation quality, but we haven't been really working multiple buyers inside of an organization. When those things are happening, we'll talk about that, what happens when they're out of balance and how to get them in balance. And yeah, and then we'll start with some tech. So let's start with the first one, target market awareness. It's just as it sounds. How well do the companies in our target market know about the problems that we solve or the results that we can help provide for their organization? So do they know about what you do? And if they do know about what you do, they know about everything that you do and why you do it, right? I've actually worked with a firm that they did a pretty good job of letting people know what it is that they were doing. Some of their target market had real questions as to, well, why do you do? I don't understand why you would get into that. I won't refer business to you because you're touching on too many different parts of business. Only when we could tell the story as to why it is that we were in these other lines of business, in addition to the core business, then it became clear as to what an advantage that would be and where they would fit to get referrals. So let's start with target market awareness. To build target market awareness, this is just a general list of activities. I think they all work, right, to a degree. So sticking with the general concept of fit, which I described on the front end, as to doing the things that work best for you. When I'm working with companies, in general, this is the advice that I give them is from this list, which ones strike you as the most interesting, and then we work inside of there. For instance, I have a real estate developer. So he would be best described as the son of a backslider, right? So it's a generational business. The elder statesman of the business built the business in a very particular way. He's super active, super gregarious, and always out in the community. The next in line, right, the person who's taking over, who I was working with, is that's just not his personality, right? He's much more analytical. People would do business for him for completely different reasons. And one of the challenges that he's had is that he's like, how is it that I get out? Because I can't, lunches are exhausting. I just can't do those over and over and over again. I get tongue-tied, I get, embarrassed. How is it that I can do it? Well, we started to pick some things that would work for him. So one of the things is he was a really good writer. And so we started with writing, can we do more writing and change the writing up a little bit and then start sharing that. And then maybe that could lead into more conversations, which is what we found. And it did work, right? So it's he was doing some thoughtful market commentaries. And when he boxed it up, shared it with the investor market, and then followed up, then that made target market awareness a lot easier for him, right? People had a better idea as to who he was and why it was that they should work with him. We've already talked a little bit about referrals. And what I mentioned there is that I like to use white papers and reports on those to talk about those. So I want to, we've kind of touched on referrals. The best way to get a referral is to ask for one. We've kind of talked about reports, the story that I just gave you, the little document that I showed you. I like to build up little reports myself about, market, my opinions of what's happening inside of the market and what people should be thinking about. The one that another one I can give you here is tools. So there are tools that a lot of us use inside of our own work, and we don't think much of it, right? There are spreadsheets that we've put together. There are macros that we've used. They are formats that are important to us. And believe it or not, they're actually interesting to our target market. So if we're trying to raise target market awareness, one of the ways we can do that besides just talking to a lot of people, referrals, or sending out a bunch of opinions about the market that people would be interested in, white papers and reports, what we can do is we can share some of the tools that we're using. I was working with a financial services firm, and they did, it was in the medical space, and they did a particular type of funding with medical. The biggest problem that they had was not necessarily finding the business. It was the thing that they complained about the most was the onboarding process, right? The salespeople were like, we're losing people because it takes too long. The underwriters are like, you guys keep finding junk. It takes too long, to format things correctly. we grabbed that format because that was really the question, right? I'm like, what do you mean? Tell me more about this formatting things correctly. Why is that important? And what do you mean? And sometimes they don't have the right codes. Sometimes there's a field that they've completely skipped. And I'm like, is this because the business is doing it on purpose? Are the medical centers not collecting this information, or is it that they just don't know because they've never tried to use this asset to lend against, to find money against? And it turns out the latter. That was really the question. As I took the tool out, we anonymized it, we took it out to the marketplace. That became a lot more interesting to the marketplace, right? They were like, oh, this is great. But the good news for us is that it was, it's a spreadsheet, but it also had the brand name of the tool on it. The company has since been absorbed into another one, but I bumped into that tool. The tool still is in existence and it's being passed around. It's shortcut the onboarding process. But the most important thing is that it made the life of the people inside the medical centers a little bit easier to move forward with. So these are examples of whatever it is that you want to do. If you have any questions about any of these, because you think to yourself, oh, I really do I like speaking or networking at industry events, or I like the idea of a boardroom briefing. Greg, can you tell me more about that? I like doing interviews. I like doing seminars. Whatever it is, just let me know. And I can help you through shortcuts to do all these, because I've done them all, tried them all, and had very success with them. Here's a little trick for how to get the most from your non-selling staff. So target market awareness, right? The more you can get, the more people in your firm you can get talking about what it is your firm does, the better. One of the ways we do that is we approach non-selling staff and ask for their help. You'll find most of them are willing and able to help. The one thing that they revolt against is that they don't want to be responsible, right? They don't want quota, but at the same time, they don't want a sales quota or a business development quota, new client quota, but they do want to help, and they do feel like maybe they can contribute in some way. That instead of dictating to them, we've had firms where people I need everybody to share and like everything that we put up on LinkedIn. The problem with that is that there's some people who are like, I'm not going to do that. Or, I'm trying to get a new job, so I don't want to put anything out on LinkedIn about my old firm. It's way better to put a list in front of them like this. Is there some way that you can help with the firm by volunteering networking events? If you put the list in front of them, they choose, and then you help them from there. If you look through all of these, they're pretty easy. And somewhere in there, somebody will either come up with the thing on the list, or they will say, well, I can't do, none of these appeal to me, but I'm willing to do something else. The goal is to get your non-selling staff to help with activities. I always think back to, they're at the family reunion, they're sitting next to Cousin George, talking to Cousin George. Cousin George says, what is it that you do? What do they say at that point? If we can get the staff to be a little more problem solution oriented, to describe what it is the firm does and not just describe their role inside of it, I make the ham sandwiches or whatever it is that they do inside your firm. We can have them describe, oh, we help, we help small businesses, small business owners that sell their business. Whatever those things are that you help them do, getting your staff to talk like that is super helpful with target market awareness. But the other one that I get a lot out of is kind of advanced, but it's teaching vendors and customers how to promote your services. The best format I found for being able to do this is identifying triggers. When you bump into people who are in this business or who have faced this problem, have them think of us, and then give them a way to describe it. And the easiest way to describe it is to stick with that one problem, right? If you find people who have an employee retention problem, give them a how when. So here's how to put it in their brain. You just describe the problem to the point where they understand what it is. How when a new employee comes aboard and it's super disruptive, and it takes, way longer and way more time to get them ramped up than expected, and they aren't super happy with the onboarding process, and your people aren't happy with the way it distracts from the current state of the business, and then heaven forbid they leave inside of 6 months. Through the work we do, we make sure that doesn't happen. Like that's what our firm does. That's one of the things that our firm does. That would be a really rough example that I just made up. Again, look up Mark Levy, because Mark Levy can walk you through this, how to put this together. But again, getting your people, getting your vendors, getting your customers to talk about you by basically talking about the problems that you solve. I put outcomes that you come up with, but problems seem to stick in people's brains a lot more than potential outcomes, even if they're really great outcomes. Problems are the things that people know the most and can identify with the most. So, target market awareness, things that your people should be doing internally, business development people, help them to do a little bit more. And then the people who are not responsible for business development, help them do more. And then the people who interact with your companies, vendors and customers, teaching them how to do it by only talking about particular problems and making them vivid in their brain is a way to raise target market awareness. So those are some tricks inside of there. The second part of this was, if you're trying to raise market awareness from whatever it is to the next level up, those are some ways to do it. If you're trying to identify multiple buyers, making sure that you're talking to all the people who've touched on your business or who are touching on your business, I have some ideas around that too. The easiest way I found to do this is in the sales process, the more you can talk about the steps of their decision process, the more likely you are to find all the people that are involved. So the way I describe this when I'm trying to teach this is, well, first of all, talking to more people automatically creates more opportunities. Getting more people to talk about the work that you do, it creates more opportunities. But then the other thing that creates more opportunities, or at least this probably moves the opportunities faster to a close, is when your people are having conversations, if they can identify all the people who are involved in the decision process. And when they first get introduced to the company, or if they're trying to, if your marketing people are trying to create materials for these companies, instead of thinking of them as companies, but thinking of them as individuals who are involved in various steps of the decision process, and then gearing marketing materials and marketing activities towards them, that gets you pretty far into the process. The way that you find this is when you're talking to a particular company, you follow this. Don't ask them all the people who are involved in the decision process. But if you ask them who's involved, you never really get any other names. And then you just kind of have to go on, well, this is what happened at this company, or this is what happened at that company, right? Usually when we talk to these people, it's, you gotta talk to Joe and I, you gotta talk to IT, you gotta talk to procurement, these are all the places where we need to have these conversations. Instead of approaching it that way, if from the beginning, whoever it is that you're talking to, if you have them describe the internal process in this language, give me the steps of the process when you make this decision. Then I still don't ask them like who makes that decision in that process. Ask them what the decision is in that step. So now what this does to the person that you're talking to is it helps them get out of the little bits into the greater process, right? So they're not thinking about anything specific anymore. They're kind of thinking about like, how do things get done around here? And you might have to prompt them through a little bit, but typically there's these steps, like there's the evaluation, there's who's involved with that, what decision is made in that particular step, like how do they decide to go or no go, or how do they make that decision? And then you get into who makes it. And by doing that, you can get a lot more people uncovered as to who's involved in the decision. Because the truth is that even though we have, there's as many as 23 people who are involved in the decision, buying decisions, as Gartner Group through their surveys, it is rare for any sales team to talk to all 23 people. In general, there's a few people who are interacting with the sales team, And a lot of decisions are being made where there's nobody involved, nobody from your side that's involved in the process. That's the thing that we're trying to change. So we want to pay attention to who is watching the opportunity develop, like who's concerned about the problem, who's going through it. And so the way to do that is to identify multiple buyers is you need to stop thinking about them as individual buyers, but as people who are in charge of a step in the process, who are after a particular decision that is made along the way. Getting those things in place is going to help you identify more buyers, and then it helps your marketing team identify ways to talk to those people about the things that they're most concerned about, right? Sometimes the business case is made by a high-level executive, a single high-level executive, but then everybody that's involved in how to fix that or achieve that business objective, they all have different rules and they all have different concerns, and you need to find them all. You need to talk to them all the way along the way. So identifying multiple buyers. The only advice I have here is really this, because it's the simplest thing to talk about, hard to teach, hard to remember in the moment. Talk about the decision-making process first. Ask who is involved in each step of the process later, as opposed to reverse, which is supernatural, and you hear that happen often. The last part of this building the never-ending pipeline, like the three-part process I talked about, is discussion quality, right? So how effective are your people at developing opportunities when sitting in front of buyers? It's really like, this is, of all the things I've talked about, this is the sole responsibility of the business development team. And in general, I've sat through enough of these conversations, even among just the smartest people who are great at this, but they've never been formally trained in sales. The advice I can give them is this. Well, the advice I do give them is this: the conversations need improvement, right? In general, the problems that I end up troubleshooting is we have walked away with no next steps. That would be like a big problem. So that there's no differentiation between your firm and other firms. There's no next steps that are identified with the people that are involved in the decision process, which they should be asking about. There's a world of like, how is it that we get to actually say no, and why do we say no? Versus, we can do that. But as opposed to, well, that's not what we do. We're not the best choice. You're best served by a specialist. The way to get great discussion quality is, I found one way is to get your people to talk about the future. So what do I mean by that? In general, by the time we've gotten a referral, there's a problem that somebody is trying to work on. And then we talk a lot about that, right? So it's a solution that they're after. We and the people who called us in as a referral, the prospect, to use sales language, the prospect and the salesperson are both they're focused on the solution, right? The way to improve that conversation is if you let the prospect come to you with the solution, and then the salesperson steps back from the solution and goes towards what is it you're trying to accomplish, right? Tries to move from, let's talk about this thing that we love talking about because it's what my company does, we're famous for it, and it's what you need, and let's double check the language. The example that I would give is doctors do this naturally, right? The first part of the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm, right? And the way they do no harm is they always just double check where you're coming from. So our child in high school, so now he's our youngest, he's now a young adult, but when he was in high school at some point, he was coming to us complaining about these terrible, terrible headaches. And in complaining about these terrible headaches, he I just started looking up, and if you go to Dr. Google, which is where I went first, you go to Dr. Google, pretty soon it becomes clear that your child is in dire straits and terrible things are going to happen. And if we don't get this fixed. And so I think I came up with like a solution of MRI, like we need to get a CAT scan or an MRI. And I laugh about it now, but at the time I was pretty serious about it. So I'm like, like there's no other symptoms. This is crazy. They're intermittent. They do these things. And we went into the doctor, and as we were sitting there describing the problem to her, she did. I knew I was learning something from the very beginning, because she listened to me very carefully, and then she stepped back and said, oh, "Do you mind if I ask your son some questions?" And then she stepped back and said, like describe, tell me what the problem is. And then as he was describing it, she was like, "Oh, when does it?" Basically, she went away from, I presented her with the solution, right? I gave her probably something that's pretty expensive to do in the healthcare world, MRIs and whole batteries of tests. People that would love, there's probably people lined up who would love to do those things. Her job is to make sure that we don't do anything wrong. And then, I'm not a doctor. She knows that. I've kind of forgotten that she would be an expert in this. And so she started asking the questions. It became clear that, of course, and you probably know this if you have teenagers, he was just spending too much time for the screen with no breaks. And so that was the first thing she suggested was, better hydration, maybe even an Advil got thrown in there. And then you need to take a lot more breaks every hour from your screen time. And sure enough, the problem got fixed. That is a quality of discussion opportunity. The me coming with the problem, with the solution ready-made to the person who provides the solution, the best thing she did was to go away from the solution, right? And she went right back up into the problem. If they're coming to you and they want to talk about the thing that you do, your best bet is to stop talking about it. If you're coming to them and saying, we can do this thing, and they say, I want that, then the best thing you can do, again, is then say, okay, well, let's talk about the things you're trying to get done first, or how we know that this might be of interest to you. Quality of discussions, raising that is the next step. It's another way to build a never-ending pipeline. And what it does, this is the thing that gets us closest to being able to say no to opportunities, because the more we know about it, the more we can say, you know what, we're not the best for that. And then if we have a lot of these, right, so everything's coming in and we have a lot of these opportunities in front of us, we can do a better job moving forward with just the best opportunities that make us the most money and that we're the best at delivering, which builds its own word of mouth inside that. So I told you I would kind of, like I said, I was running through these pieces of the puzzle. This piece, right? I gave you a few things to dig into each one of those circles. But as a manager, this is really the tool that I use, right? So I want to know when somebody needs help with pipeline. How are they doing with market awareness? How are they doing with finding multiple buyers inside of organizations? And then how is the conversation going internally? I gave you some pieces that are troubleshooting inside there. Like this is, different things we can do to help improve each of those things. But for the most part, this is the general score sheet that I would use. Scale of 1 to 10, how do you think you're doing? And then what would happen if we improved any of these? Because if they are out of balance, this is what happens, right? If number one there is you have market awareness, and you're talking to all sorts of buyers, you've got gear that's going out to all of them, but your conversation quality, when the business development rep is in front of people, is not as good as it could be, you're probably not differentiating your firm very well when it comes down to it. Conversely, if you have market awareness and conversation quality, but you're not identifying all the multiple buyers who are making decisions and influencing decisions, then your deal flow is not going to go very fast. So you may be doing a good job bringing things into the pipeline, but as you know, if it takes forever for these to close, if it takes years, in some cases, people are like, oh, I got introduced to them 5 years ago, and then we finally got around to doing it. Yeah, way too long. And it could probably be shortened. And if it is shortened, it helps us get more and better opportunities in. But the last one, which hopefully is not the problem that you're working on, but it's the one that I seem to spend a lot more time on, is you're fine with, you have understanding a lot of people. When you have conversations, they're great conversations. There's just a lot of people don't know about you. So you're unknown. What you want to do is you want to bring all those things into balance. So that's tool number one. as we say, is using the this little Venn diagram to help troubleshoot why our pipeline is not there. So actually, I'd say this is tool 2. It's really tool 3, right? Tool 1 is priming the pump, when I talked to you about like how to get in touch with your entire database and the best way to approach that. Tool number 2 is what we just talked about, being able to identify each of these areas and which area should we focus on in order to get more people into our pipeline. And the last thing, this number 2 tool that I'm going to talk to you about is one that's built on this sales cycle, and it's really qualifying. So along with not being able to say no to opportunities, the more times you talk to people who are perfectly in your market, the better off you are. The problem with a lot of newer business development people is they're not exactly sure who to talk to until they've talked to a lot of people, right? So how do you take the experience of the experienced people and put it into the young people so that they learn quickly? And that's what we're going to talk about. This part of the sales cycle, which is we know the lead, right? We know who it is that we're supposed to be talking to. And then when we talk to them, this shared values part, how do we mean by shared values? And that's before we get into the rest of the whole sales cycle. Let me tell you a story about that. So we want to score leads to save time. And I'll teach you a quick scoring system that works really well. I've actually bumped into nothing better for training people than for them to use the scoring system. The hardest part is you got to build the scoring system. So we start by doing traits of best clients. We rank those traits. We then take each of the traits qualities, and we kind of start to say, so if it is male, defining the quality. Okay, well, yeah, a male. Is there any males that are better? Well, yeah, like age 35 to 45 is better than the younger ones or the older ones, right? And we put scores on all those, and then ranking the scoring system. So when we're putting this together, the reason it works is what I call, actually, the joke is, I was working with the law firm, and we ended up with this. I was telling the story of the chicken sexing. They were like, it's client sexing. And chicken sexing, if you've never heard of it, is baby chicks. So at these nursery, who knows if computers are doing it these days, but it used to be that at these poultry farms, that when you want to separate the egg layers from the ones that are going to be dinner. So the egg laying chicks. The problem with the chicks is that they're basically indiscernible to the human eye. You can look at the genitalia or where the genitalia should be, and you can't see anything. So how do you know if it's a boy or a girl? Well, it turns out that there are people who are experts at this. They actually are called chicken sexers. And these chicken sexers, as I was reading this article, they can tell just at a glance. And so if any of us did this, we'd be like 50-50 at best as to whether or not we were accurate with guessing if it was a boy or a girl. These chicken sexers are like 93%. It's super high. And so they're in high demand, and they basically go in and they would do this rapid chicken sexing. The fascinating part, and where it comes into play here, is scoring leads kind of works like chicken sexing, because the chicken sexers, when they're training other chicken sexers, the way they do it is the new chicken sexer will pull it out and take a guess. Yes or no. And then the actual chicken sexer will say nope, and they'll make the switch. And then they just keep doing it over and over again. And something in our incredible subconscious minds starts to differentiate between what it is that we're seeing, right? We no longer are just looking at fluffy chickens, but there's little traits that are starting to pop out to us every time they make a correction. And over time, that's how a chicken sexer is trained. This was brought up because when I was doing this with actually it was a financial services firm, but as she was learning how to better source new opportunities, we worked with the partners. We were able to come up with this list the same way I'm going to show you, giving her the criteria, and then she manually had to go through and she was scoring leads. a laborious process, but she was doing it before and during and after as she was talking to these people. And when I went back to her, it was less than a month later. And we were revisiting on the thing. And I was like, how's the scoring tool working? And she's like, I've stopped using it. I hope that's okay. Because after using it a few times, I now know just by, looking at the company's website and doing a few other things, I know who's a good prospect and who's not. She had become a chicken sexer. So how does the chicken sexing work? Like I said, there's the list of best client, the traits, ranking them 1 to 10, defining qualities, ranking those from low to high, and then scoring them out. So how does it work? Let's pull up an example that was relevant to the accounting firm who was trying to find more opportunities for their the business sale to help with ESOPs. And so of those pieces, this isn't exactly right, but we came up with a big list, like what are some things that make a firm more likely to be interested in ESOPs versus not interested. So where should the business development people spend the most time? And we came up with this list, right? Day-to-day management, the owner's emotionally distance from the business. They're in growth mode, the size of the company, the owner has more than 30% of the company, key employees are important to the company. When we started going through that, big list, give me all the traits of people who are candidates for ESOPs. We came up with this big list. It was much larger than this. And then it was going through separately and saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is this? Because some things are more important than others. Like growth mode is really just not that important when it comes to whether or not somebody was a candidate for an ESOP. There's plenty of good established businesses that were no longer in growth mode that were candidates for ESOPs, right? So that's a 4. But key employees, like having key employees that you can't lose, suddenly makes an ESOP a lot more attractive. So just picking the one, day-to-day management, once you kind of rank them on importance to which of these traits are more important than the others, then what you need to do is you work across the grid and you need to identify low to high. So low, the day-to-day management, and the owner is in there every day. That would be a low scoring opportunity. The middle, right? They use systems, but they're still pretty involved. That is better than the 1, but it's still a 5. And then 9, almost all the way up to perfect is they have a lot of systems, and then the people are absent from the day-to-day management. The owners are absent from the day-to-day management. I should probably systems, the owner is absent. The owner is absent from day-to-day management of the business. And what you can do there is you can score it out, right? So if they score a 9, did I put that down? If they score a 9 and day-to-day management is a 7 of importance, they get 63 for that. And if you took all these and added them up, your max is 430 that you score, and you come up with, say, 368 for this particular prospect. That helps you identify which prospects are better than others and why. The reason I bring it up is because it's a great training tool. So if you are trying to bring new people around, the challenge is you got to make these grids for all the opportunities that you're talking about. The reason why you go through the trouble of quizzing your people and having them fill this whole thing out, having your current business development people talk their way through these traits and what is good versus bad inside that trait, what exactly do they mean, is because of that, right? Because you're turning your future salesperson, you're getting them up to speed a lot faster. When they can get up to speed a lot faster, that's what leads to better conversations, right? So that's another piece of where better conversations comes into place. So I know I zipped through that. We get a lot of questions around how to make this work. And the best way to make it work is you got to give me an example of a product that you're trying to sell, and then we can run through it. It takes a little bit, but then once the management is trained on how to do it, you can come up with a lot of these. And then the more they get used by your trainees, the people that you want to get into business development and you want to have them identify better opportunities, the more sold on the concept that you it turns into. Yeah. So hopefully this is making sense. What we were talking about is to bring this whole thing together, right? If we're trying to build the never-ending pipeline, the reason we want to build it, of course, is because it gives us vision of the future. It helps us when somebody brings us and you're like, will you help me with this? We can say no to opportunities, super powerful, and it becomes a magnet for new people. That ESOP tool, the ESOP example of the business prospect scoring tool, the client sexing tool that I was just talking about, is great for bringing people in, right? People want to be better at things. They want to get good at things. They want to be good at your business. Teaching them how to do that helps them think. It helps you think. Probably makes you more attractive for ESOP. And then all this impacts your bottom line. The tool that I use the most for troubleshooting this why is a pipeline short, one is the one that's not on here, is we talk about priming the pump. Like, are you doing at least the bare minimum of talking to people in your database? Once you've got that going and there's opportunities that are starting to bubble up, then let's get into some of this. How are we doing with market awareness? How are we doing with talking to all the people who are involved in the decision processes that we put together? And then when we're talking to them, how great are those conversations that we're moving through? And then the last piece is, or the last tool that we talked about today is this one, the client section, being able to rapidly discern who it is that I should be talking to. Because we want the fastest way to change a sales cycle is spend more time with the right people, right? And you all know this. So what do you do next? Gosh, Greg, you've just been yakking at me for I don't know how long. And what is it that I can do next? I would start with that predictable growth scoring tool, the Venn diagram. I apologize. Start with that Venn diagram. In each of those sections, give yourself your own score of a scale of 1 to 10. Like, how do you define a 10? What would perfect be in your case? And how would you define a 1? And then what score do you give your firm? That should usually identify if we're going to try to pull those into balance. If you're out of balance in any one of those, that's a good place to start. Set the goal of getting in balance and then improve in one area. The last thing is if people have not been doing a ton, that you've been subsisting on existing, like, normally we grow 10% a year. We've been growing 10 to 12% for the last couple of years without doing anything. That's a good sign for maybe you should be doing a little bit more. And in doing a little bit more, take your customer base, take your prospect base, start ranking them, label, score, discuss amongst yourself how it is that you're going to work with them. And that's a good place to go. You found me, so I assume that you know about my website and my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to connect. The book, The Human Being's Guide to Business Growth, outlines a few of these bits and bobs that we've been talking about. And then I have the latest white paper that I've done with Mark Hurst, where we talk about customer culture and building business for a digital future, which a lot of us are dealing with right now, which is most of our customers want to do more things online. So how do we make that happen? If you need more, I have a weekly newsletter that comes out. I encourage you to subscribe. I've been told that it's really funny. And the ideas are okay too. So that's all I have for you. If you have questions, comments, concerns, or if you want more specific examples, by all means, reach out and I would love to talk to you more about what's going on in your business. Thank you. I can see the sunshine's coming through, and this is my brother-in-law's restaurant, Hinterland. So if you're ever in Green Bay, Wisconsin, stop and talk to my brother and sister-in-law, Bill and Michelle.